In 1898, one newspaper headline helped push the United States into a war that historians still argue could have been avoided. No general ordered it. No president planned it months in advance. A few words in oversized type, printed across the front page of a New York newspaper, did most of the convincing. The man who built the machine behind that headline grew up an orphan, slept in flop houses, and got fired from a waiter job because his temper boiled over a steak order. Everyone assumes the attention economy started with Facebook, or TikTok, or some algorithm engineer in Silicon Valley. It didn't. It started with a broke Hungarian immigrant more than 100 years earlier. His name was Joseph Pulitzer, and the machine he built to control public attention in the 1880s is the exact same machine running every app on your phone right now. This isn't a history lesson. This is the user manual for the platform you're watching this video on. Pulitzer was born in 1847 in Hungary into a wealthy Jewish merchant family. He had tutors. He had books. He had every comfort a childhood could offer, except patience. Pulitzer hated being told what to think, and when one tutor pushed a lesson he found pointless, Pulitzer chased the man straight out a window. That temper followed him his entire life, sometimes destroying him, sometimes making him a fortune. Then the comfort disappeared completely. By his early teens, his father and most of his siblings were dead, mostly from illness, the kind of repeated loss that would warp anyone's relationship with their own body and health. He went from wealthy heir to functional orphan in a matter of years, and that loss never left him. It planted a lifelong, almost obsessive anxiety about his own health that would resurface decades later. At the exact moment he had the least reason left to worry about money. At 17, with nothing keeping him in Hungary, he boarded a ship for America, completely alone. He arrived broke. A recruiter offered him passage money in exchange for joining the Union Army during the Civil War, so he signed up, served briefly, and walked away with a discharge and about $135. That money didn't last long. He was unemployed and sometimes homeless in New York City. He moved to St. Louis because it had a large German-speaking immigrant community and he spoke fluent German. Once there, he took every job that would take him. He worked as a mule handler and hated every minute of it. He did riverboat labor and construction. He waited tables until his temper got him fired over a disagreement about a steak order. This was a man with zero stability and zero safety net, in a country that owed him nothing. Here's the part almost nobody includes in this story. While Pulitzer was broke and unemployed, he was obsessively self-educated. He joined subscription libraries he could barely afford and read constantly. History, biography, anything he could find. He deliberately ate as little as possible, not to save money for comfort, but to buy more hours in the day to read. He wasn't preparing for one specific dream job. He was relentlessly improving at whatever task happened to be in front of him that week, fully without holding back, while waiting for an opening he couldn't yet see. That habit is what eventually connected him to a leader in a local German aid society who happened to own a newspaper. That single connection became his first real opening into journalism. Notice what actually caused the break. It wasn't talent alone. It was years of unglamorous effort aimed at nothing in particular, until one door happened to open. This is the exact same principle. Charlie Munger spent his whole career repeating to investors, do the job that's actually in front of you, completely. Instead of waiting around for a better one to appear, Pulitzer was mucking out stables and waiting tables, while reading every book he could borrow, with no proof any of it would ever pay off. Most people in that position give up on self-improvement entirely, because the reward isn't visible yet. Pulitzer kept going anyway. That gap between people who quit when there's no proof and people who keep building skill in the dark is usually the entire difference between who gets the lucky break and who doesn't. The luck still has to show up, but it can only find you if you're already sharp enough to use it. Pulitzer didn't just become a good reporter. He became a publisher. He bought a failing paper, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and turned it into something genuinely new for its time. He filled it with crime stories, scandal, bold illustrations, and aggressive investigations into local corruption. He wasn't writing for the educated elite who already had plenty of newspapers competing for them. He was writing for working-class readers who had never once been treated like an audience worth fighting for. It worked immediately. The paper became wildly profitable, and Pulitzer became powerful enough to make real enemies, his temper fueling actual physical confrontations tied to stories his paper ran. But the formula was now proven beyond doubt. Entertainment plus real reporting equals an audience that physically cannot look away. Then he moved to New York and bought a dying paper called The World. This is where Pulitzer stopped being a successful regional publisher and became the inventor of something far bigger. He didn't just make the world profitable, he made it the loudest, most emotionally charged, most impossible to ignore newspaper in the entire country. Illustrations, cartoons, human interest stories engineered to make you feel something within the first sentence. Public crusades against corruption that turned ordinary readers into participants. In the story itself, circulation didn't just grow, it exploded past every competitor in the city. And that success pulled in a second player who would push the entire formula past anything Pulitzer had intended. That player was William Randolph Hearst, who studied Pulitzer's formula line by line and then decided to out-sensationalize him completely. What followed became known as the era of yellow journalism. And it was, without much exaggeration, the first full-scale attention war in modern media history. The two papers competed almost entirely on emotional intensity rather than accuracy. Bigger headlines, more outrage, more fear, more moral certainty, delivered with zero hesitation. Both papers sent illustrators to draw dramatic battle scenes for conflict the reporters hadn't actually witnessed, because an emotional drawing sold more papers than a careful, accurate account ever could. There's a famous, often disputed line attributed to Hearst, telling a correspondent to supply the pictures because he'd supply the war himself. Historians argue about whether he actually said it. Nobody argues about whether his papers behaved exactly like he did. Whoever made readers feel the most in the shortest amount of time won the most readers that day. This wasn't journalism competing on truth. It was journalism competing on adrenaline. And the public couldn't tell the difference because nobody had built that filter into their brain yet. Then that competition collided with an actual geopolitical crisis. In February 1898, the USS Maine exploded in Havana Harbor, Cuba. Nobody at the time actually knew what caused it. Investigations were incomplete and contested for decades afterward. But Pulitzer's World and Hearst's journal ran headlines blaming Spain with complete, unwavering certainty. No real evidence required to print it that confidently. Remember, the Maine spread across the country as a rallying cry, manufactured in large part by two newspapers competing over circulation numbers in New York. The United States declared war on Spain. A few months later, two publishers, fighting over readership, helped manufacture the emotional pressure that pushed an entire nation into armed conflict. That is not an exaggeration. That is documented media history. This exact pattern is the central thesis of Tim Wu's book, The Attention Merchants. Wu argues that this era, Pulitzer's era, is where the entire modern business model of media was actually invented. The model of capturing human attention first and reselling it second, regardless of whether what's being sold is true, healthy, or even real. Every algorithm built to maximize your watch time. Every outrage headline engineered for a click. Every notification timed to spike a feeling before you've consciously processed anything. All of it runs on mechanics. Pulitzer perfected in the 1880s with nothing but ink, paper, and boys shouting headlines on street corners. He had no algorithm, but the underlying code was identical to what runs your phone today. Emotion spreads faster than truth, and whoever controls the emotion controls the audience. And here's the twist almost nobody includes. The man who built the most effective attention hijacking machine in human history eventually couldn't tolerate input of any kind himself. In his early 40s, at the absolute peak of his power, Pulitzer went almost completely blind from retinal disease. He also developed extreme hypersensitivity to sound, to the point where ordinary noise physically hurt him. He spent his last 2 decades largely in isolation, at times on a custom soundproof yacht built specifically to shield him from the world, directing a media empire he could no longer see or hear through. Secretaries who read reports, allowed and carefully controlled tones. This was a man who had spent his entire working life forcing an entire country to pay attention to him, ending it unable to tolerate the world paying any attention back. The inventor of mass attention capture became, in his final years, the one person on earth most desperate to escape stimulation entirely. Sit with that for a second because it is the actual moral of this whole story. Before he died in 1911, Pulitzer tried to repair some of what he knew he had helped break. He funded the Columbia School of Journalism and established the Pulitzer Prize, an award designed to pull journalism back toward integrity and public service instead of pure sensationalism. The man who helped invent the attention economy spent his final years building a counterweight to it. He understood near the end exactly what he had unleashed into the world, and he tried, even partially, to undo it. Here's what this actually means for you. Watching this on a device Pulitzer could never have imagined. The mechanics he perfected with ink in the 1880s are the same mechanics running every feed you open today. Outrage gets shared faster than nuance. Fear gets clicked faster than calm explanation. Certainty sells better than honesty, even when the certainty is fake. None of that happened by accident, and none of it started with social media. It started with two newspapermen competing for circulation more than a century ago. Once you can actually see the machine, it loses most of its power over you. As a viewer, that means pausing before you share something that made you feel a sudden hit of outrage or fear, and asking what exact emotion it was built to trigger. A thumbnail with a shocked face, a headline with a missing word that forces you to click, a comment section engineered to make you furious enough to reply. All of it is The World and the Journal in 1898, just running on glass instead of paper. As a creator, and if you're watching a channel like this, you're probably building one. It means a real choice sits in front of you every time you post. You can build an audience the Pulitzer way, hijacking emotion regardless of truth, because it works fast and it works reliably. Or you can build one the way he tried to fix things at the very end of his life. Value first, honesty over volume. Slower, but something you can actually defend later. Both paths can get you views. Only one survives your own scrutiny when you look back at what you built. If you want to go deeper on exactly how this machine works, read The Attention Merchants by Tim Wu. It will permanently change how you look at your own phone. And if this one hit, you know what to do. Subscribe, because tomorrow's concept from history, biography, and books drops in 24 hours.